Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This episode is brought to you by Boombox Gifts, memory boxes filled with personal messages and photos from friends and family for your next special occasion. Check it out at boomboxgifts.com. I'm excited to be here today with Dena Moes, who's the author of The Buddha Sat Right Here, A Family Odyssey Through India and Nepal. She has a BA in literature and an MS in nursing from Yale University. An essayist, storyteller, and songwriter, Dena is the mother of 2 girls and currently lives in California. Her book recently won first place in the Indie Publishers Book Awards in Travel and also first place in the Next Generation Indie Awards in Travel. So welcome to Dena.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here today.
So Dena, can you tell listeners what The Buddha Sat Right Here is about and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. So the shortest answer is that my book is a memoir of adventure, motherhood, and love woven into a spiritual journey. And to expand on that a little, in 2014, I was a mother who had pretty much had it all. I was a busy home birth midwife with a very successful practice. I had 2 amazing daughters who were thriving. I had a marriage, a house, a yard, a dog, a cat, et cetera, et cetera. And from the looks of it, it looks like everything was swell. But inside, something deep inside me was eroding, and I felt hollow, and a lot of feelings came up that were not joyful. I wasn't content, and I got this crazy idea that we needed to just change it up completely. And so we rented out our house, we shuttered our businesses, and my family took an 8-month backpacking journey through India and Nepal, which was a wild thing to do. It had always been my bucket list place to go. It had been my dream. And I thought I almost went to India several times before I had kids, and each time something happened and I ended up not going. And so right in the middle of raising my kids, I thought, I don't want to wait until they're grown and do this at some point in the future. And when I realized that they could each carry their own belongings in their backpack, I decided we should just do this.
That's amazing. I feel like I can't even get my son to pick up his backpack. He wheels his backpack to 5 feet to the car. So the fact that your kids are carrying their belongings on their back through India is humbling.
Well, this didn't come out of thin air. We live in fairly rural California, and we had done a lot of camping and backpacking and trekking into music festivals and places like that with them through their whole childhoods. So it wasn't completely out of thin air. They were used to fairly rugged travel. They were used to carrying their stuff in backpacks at times to get where they needed to go. And our enthusiasm for the trip was really contagious. They were very excited to embark on this adventure with us.
And tell me a little more about why India and how also this became a pilgrimage and what pilgrimage means to you.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Dena suggested I ask her that question, which is a great question. So I just want to give her credit for that one.
So I've always considered myself a spiritual seeker. I grew up Jewish. When I lived in New York in the 90s, I belonged to a beautiful circle of sort of Wiccan practitioners. And then I began to study Buddhism about 18 years ago. And when I learned about Buddhism, it just really resonated with me as these principles of cultivating love and compassion in yourself and how that reflects out into the world just rang so true to me. I just thought, where's this been all my life? And became sort of a student of Buddhism. And of course, the Buddha lived in India, and he was actually born in Nepal, but then he lived in India. He sat under a tree in India and awakened to enlightenment. And there's still a place there where you can go, where there's a tree that marks that spot. And it's a very holy pilgrimage site. We spend a good deal of time there in my book. And then also in India, there's large communities of Tibetan refugees because, in case people don't know, Tibet is now in occupied China. It's now occupied by China and has been for many, many years. And so there's been a big erosion of Tibetan culture and Buddhist traditions there. So there's a lot of refugees in Nepal and India, and they're building monasteries and keeping the traditions alive, keeping the spiritual path alive that is from Tibet. And so and my husband, Adam, had spent a year in India when he was in his 20s. So we had all these connections. It had always been my bucket list place, even though I knew it was going to be hard travels and confronting at times and really challenge us. The idea of a pilgrimage is that it's a journey that changes you, that's transformative. So it's not a vacation and you don't come back the same. And so with that intention, we set out on this trip.
That's amazing.
And boy, did it change us in so many ways.
So in the opening section of your book, you have yourself trekking through a storm, basically, and reflecting what a difference from the life I left behind, I think, as I trudge along. Our American life was a juggling act, and I was constantly dropping balls. Here, and you itemized all the balls you were dropping. Here, I have one task: walk. No schedule to keep, no to-do list, nobody paging me or pulling at my attention. Just walk, one foot in front of the other, wiping the snow from my eyes. I revel in the simplicity, the focus, which is great. So take me back to that moment right there.
Yeah, I call that my Annapurna epiphany. The beginning of the book sort of drops you into the middle of the story. Yes. So this was about halfway through our trip, and we were in Nepal on a trek. And that moment was really about my family kind of got ahead of me, and then it started to snow, and suddenly I was all alone. I knew they were just ahead, just out of sight. I'm always the slowest hiker. I'm not an athlete myself. And I like to be behind, so I'm not feeling like I'm holding people back behind me. So I was just going along at my own pace. And then as the snow got really thick and suddenly I realized I was in a blizzard, at first, all these emotions of fear and worry for my kids and all these things arose. It's almost like panic that, oh my gosh, it's snowing and I'm out here and we're so high up and blah, blah, blah. And then I just told myself to stop those thoughts and just settle, just give that some space. And what happened was I had this total release of surrendering responsibility for my entire family. And I just realized how much, as a woman and a mother, I'm always trying to control everybody's experiences somehow. Like, oh, it's snowing. Does everyone have their coats on? Is everyone walking safely? Does everyone have their water bottle? How far ahead? Because Sophia's so small. Always thinking of everybody else. And in that moment, because I couldn't even see my kids, I didn't know exactly where anybody was, I just let go. And I just felt this utter and complete freedom. And it was so joyful. I just started crying tears of joy. I felt here, fully present in the moment without any worries or thoughts of the past or the future. So it was sort of a spiritual epiphany.
Wow.
And it allowed me to break some patterns in my parenting and think differently about my children, who were at that point old enough, transitioning from child to teenager.
How old are they both?
They were 10 and 14. That permission to no longer be responsible for their experiences. So it's like, I can bring the family to places, but the experiences that they have is up to them. I need to be aware of my experience.
That's beautiful. Can they tell that you changed in that regard? Or is it more just a shift in mindset for you? Like, are there things that you actually do differently now with them, you think? Or?
Well, naturally, because they just keep getting older and older. Yes. I mean, one went off to college. That's, really letting go of control. It was more an inner thing for myself and a relaxing of a certain amount of anxiety and worry that I was always sort of holding about them, and my own ability to trust them more and trust reality more, to hold them, that, I'm, as my husband says, the sun will rise even if I'm not thinking about it.
Oh, I like that. Excellent. This is great. This is going to be like help for anxiety. I'm now realizing this is my added perk of this session here.
Yes. Well, I will say that my overall motto for India travel is relax, because absolutely nothing is under control.
I feel sometimes, though, when people tell me to relax, it does not help me relax at all. But a story like yours about how you did it, that's something, right, that you can take that in your back pocket. You had another passage about how things were before you left, just to contrast. You said this whole American approach to parenting is whack, and then you tell your kids 63. Do you know what that number is? That is the number of times I feed you each week. Can you even believe it? 60 friggin' 3. That is 3 meals a day for 3 people, 7 days a week, and it is not even counted as a job. So talk to me about where you were and then where you came back, and then I'll talk about the middle journey after that.
Yes. Well, so here's one piece in my story. So my sister lives in India, and she is a foreign correspondent, and she had a baby. And before I took my whole family, I went to visit her after she had a baby. And she's a single mother in India. And I went to India with this idea that, I was going to cook for her and I was going to tidy the apartment while she rests after giving birth. And I got there, and she has a cook who's in the kitchen all day making food. She has a maid who's tidying the house. She has a driver who takes her where she needs to go. And this is normal in Asian culture for working women or women without extended family, without relatives who live in the home. And it just hit me how in America, mothers are so isolated and are expected to do so many people's jobs all by themselves, and how just wrong that is on so many levels, how unsustainable that is. And seeing how families operate in Asia, I saw that in America, the way we do it is really just a drop in the bucket of global humanity. Like, women are not so isolated all over the world. And it just broke open this perspective. And a lot of people are talking now about emotional labor and the mental load of motherhood and how much women juggle. And I came back from visiting my sister, and I just thought, this just doesn't work. Of course this doesn't work. It's not meant to work. One person is not meant to do so many things. And I just started realizing all the jobs that I do that aren't even considered a job. It's just completely taken for granted that mom knows where everything is. Mom knows where everyone's going. Mom knows what's going to be for dinner. Oh, mom works full time. Yep, because it's equality. It's equality between the sexes now. Men and women are equal. But not really. It's really hard to make that true in the home.
So what can we do about it?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have the answer.
That's okay.
I mean,
I'm not sure anyone has the answer.
Yeah, I think, well, when I look at my husband and I mean, we're a little older than you maybe. You know, we grew up in the 70s and feminism was brand new. You know, my husband's mother was a stay-at-home mom who cooked and had a nice dinner on the table every night with lipstick on for her husband when he came home, and, you know, took her kids for ice cream sundaes after school. And that's his memory, you know, of mom in the house. So, you know, change comes slowly. My husband and I, we've been working on it within our home really intensively since our India trip, when all the issues about this really bubbled up for us. And I think talking about it is really helpful because I didn't even have the language to describe what the problem was until I went to India and saw that all moms all over the world are not being these super moms, you know, juggling 6 different jobs. Prior to that, I didn't even have the vocabulary, and I thought the problem was really just me and Adam. You know, the problem was in my marriage. The problem was with me. So getting the perspective and having people talk about it and talking about it, men and women amongst themselves and with the next generations. I mean, I think it is changing. I know it's changed a lot in my family too.
Yeah. Well, I've also interviewed a number of authors who are working on this and changing gender stereotypes and responsibility of who does what. And it's definitely a focus.
It's in the cultural conversation right now, which is fantastic.
I'm not sure, and I don't want to get off track because I want to hear more about your trip and talk about your book. But it's not like even if the dads did just as much, like, I'm not sure that's the answer either. I think it's this extended community situation. It's not like, oh, if my husband took on 20 of those 63 meals, our life would be so easy. Like, do you know what I mean?
Right. And I say that in my book at one point. Where I feel this forgiveness towards us. It's like, it's not Adam. It's not me. All of this was never meant to be done by even just 2 people. Right. A huge home, a yard, the kids, all the, you know, activities of community and society we're expected to perform and provide. And I do think the answer is creating more of a village and a community. And that, for when we came back from India, that's something that we really invested in, is our neighbors and creating a network of sharing and helping. And support with our kids. And that's been really wonderful.
Probably better for the kids too.
Definitely.
Right? I mean,
yes.
Speaking of the kids, so when you were traveling all over, a couple times I started getting really nervous. Like, as I mentioned, I was reading this alongside my son as he was reading, which is sweet. And I would like read different passages and I'm like, oh my gosh, her daughter is throwing up against a window. Something really bad is about to happen. Like, what if the daughter doesn't get better? What does they end up? What's going to happen next? So you keep adding all these things where you would get sick or Adam would get sick or a daughter of yours would get sick. And I was like, should she be over there? What's she going to do? Like, I started worrying. Did you start worrying? Like, did you ever feel, and like when you were climbing down the mountain and you were so sick and it was just you and the girls and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is she going to make it? Like,
she makes it. She's stronger than she thought. Well, here's the thing. So if we had just stayed home in the course of a school year, do your kids ever get sick?
No, I know.
So
yes, of course.
So when you're traveling, they are going to get sick. And here's the thing. And because I had my sister in Delhi, she's lived in India for 15 years. She is healthy as anything. And we got a lot of advice from her about staying healthy. The bottom line is, if you're traveling in the developing world, there are times when you're going to get sick and then you're going to get better. Mm-hmm. And that's just a reality. And we just kind of accepted that. Like, everyone gets tummy upset in India if you're there for a while. I mean, even if you're there for a couple of weeks, you probably will. And most of the time, you just get better on your own. And because, I am a nurse and my husband's a doctor of Chinese medicine. We always knew that if one of us got really sick, we'd go in for help, but we never needed to. We were never in the hospital or anything like that. Nothing was ever that serious. The closest we came was little Sophia in that beach resort. But, the problem solved and she was better. So I wasn't afraid of getting sick. Also, honestly, healthcare in India there's quite good healthcare. It's not like, oh, there's no doctors. We're not somewhere where there's no doctors, there's no medicines.
Probably better
there's
there.
Very high quality. And yeah, there was a couple times, it didn't go in the book, like Sophia, she got something in her ear and we went to the doctor and he gave her these drops. And even now, it was such a little magical experience going and meeting the doctor and getting the care and it just being so smooth. None of this paperwork like in the United States. You go to a doctor, you have to fill out 20 pages of paperwork and insurance and ID. In India, you just go in and hand them a few dollars worth of rupees and sit and have chai with the doctor and he looks at the problem and gives you a little medicine packet. It's lovely. And
Maybe I should go there just for that. Let's go back to your nursing and the fact that you're a midwife. I found, as I mentioned to you before, in the book, those were some of my favorite parts because I haven't read that much about women who worked as, actually I read The Midwife like forever ago by Chris Bajelian. Did you read Midwives? Mm-hmm. Anyway, but that was a long time ago. And I found it so interesting, the situations in which you found yourself, like going down these country roads and horrible storms and then the delivery and even all the detail. I just found it so interesting. And yet you end up sort of in trouble. And that is a theme that stays with you throughout this book. So tell me a little more about that.
Yes. So I'm a certified nurse midwife, which means I'm a registered nurse and I have a master's degree also in nurse midwifery. And most nurse midwives in the United States work in hospital settings, but we are trained and licensed to work in home, hospital, or birth center. I became a midwife because I was very drawn to home birth. I read the book Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskin as a young woman, and it just sort of set me on the path of midwifery. And I was very blessed to serve as a home birth midwife in my rural Northern California community based out of Chico for a dozen years while my kids were growing up. And it was just a beautiful experience. I got to be the town midwife, the community midwife, and so many of our friends, I got to attend the births of their children and just be such a part of the community. And I love home birth because I love giving women the opportunity to listen to their own bodies and do what they need to do. Birth is a physiologic process. Mammals all give birth in privacy, in darkness, squatting on the floor, and when you give a woman the freedom to find her way, that's usually how she will give birth, in the home setting. And so then, of course, there's the whole political side of midwifery. It's very politicized because it's territorial. The obstetricians are very threatened by autonomous home birth midwives. And also, obstetricians don't really understand natural birth because the way they were trained is, looking for complications. And so many births in hospital settings are not normal because of the positions and the medications and the monitoring and the IVs. So most obstetricians can't even really imagine what a home birth is like. So there's a lot of political, and who has the power? The doctors. So what happened in my community is vaginal births after cesarean sections were banned the same year I opened my home birth practice, due to politics and insurance and bureaucracy, okay? So that right there was a really infringement on the rights of women. I mean, only in obstetrics can a patient not refuse surgery. She is forced to have surgery. Think about that.
That's crazy.
You can't do that in any other branch of medicine. Your neck hurts? I'm sorry. You may not refuse surgery. Right. So I and most home birth midwives, when the vaginal births after C-section started getting banned, we continued to provide them in the home setting. And I will always stand by the fact that the most outrageously gorgeous births that I ever attended were VBACs, because a woman who's given birth by a C-section with her first birth, who then goes on to have a natural birth at home and get to just hold her baby in her arms and land in her bed and be totally supported and respected and feel every sensation of that baby coming through the birth canal. There is nothing more powerful than that rite of passage. And so I provided VBACs, not even that often, just a few here and there. Women had to find me and ask for them. It's not like I was advertising. But I had one that became a very complicated situation that actually had nothing to do with the VBAC, but there were other medical complications. And when I went into the hospital with that patient, the obstetricians were livid, and they wrote a letter and they turned me into the board of nursing, who then came after me. As a result, I am not doing home birth at this time.
Still? Oh.
Well, I'm working in a women's clinic, which I absolutely love.
Right.
And which is also extremely important in these times right now.
Yeah.
Providing reproductive health care.
Yes. No, that's amazing that you're doing that. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I just feel bad because I know you loved it. But
yeah, it's good. I'm enjoying not waking up in the middle of the night.
So now that you're back, just to close this chapter, you have this amazing journey, which you wrote about in a great way, like including letters from your daughter and like her diary, not letters, but like her diary entries, and like just such a great way of showing it from a lot of perspectives. You came home, now you're trying to leverage your neighbors. Anything else that you took away from the trip now that you're back that maybe we all could benefit from without having to take the trip?
Yes, I developed my Moes theory of parenting, Moes theorem of parenting, which is that when the adults in the home are being creative and thriving, the children will naturally thrive as well. And so what I saw in families in India is that the focus is not as much on the kids and the kids' activities as it is in American families. And there's just more trust that if the kids are orbiting parents who are doing interesting things, the kids will also develop and be creative. So one of the things I did was just dial down all the expectations. And part of that was this forgiveness of myself and forgiveness to my husband for the difficulties that we'd had in the years leading up to that, where I had these extremely high expectations. His parenting style was naturally a lot more low-key and go with the flow, and we weren't very good at communicating between those two styles and how to find that middle ground. So forgiving ourselves and forgiving myself for not being perfect, and that there wouldn't be a homemade stew every night, and some nights the kids could just make themselves spaghetti and a salad and call it good. And so dialing back expectations, reaching out more into the community. And I mean, one thing that was so wonderful about our trip is that we were all together for this long period of time, whereas in so much of American life, each day, everybody's going in a different direction. You know, you have school, you have work, you have this activity, we'll all meet for 20 minutes here and then we'll all go to bed and do it again tomorrow. Well, when you're traveling, your days are loose, you're all together. And how precious that was. I think we all appreciated each other more, and we all had grown so much closer through that experience. And just setting aside time to just be as a family without plans, without activities is something that we started doing and we still do, and that I would really recommend families do.
That's excellent.
Even if it means saying no to birthday parties, no to this, no to that. Like, it's really precious to hang out with the people that you love and in an unscheduled way.
And so what is coming next for you?
Well, I'm probably going to start a book about my life as a midwife, my career as a home birth midwife. It's tentatively titled Rebel Midwife, and it's sort of in the development stage at this time.
Excellent. I can't wait to read that one. Do you have any advice to aspiring authors?
Yes. If you are inspired to write, just write. Stories are powerful medicine, and they are what hold our culture. The stories that we put out into the world shape and affect how we think as a community and a society. And it also can be very powerful for your own healing and your own transformation. You know, Anais Nin wrote that we write to taste life twice, once in the moment and then again in the retrospect. And I certainly found that true in the writing of this memoir. I got to relive my journey through India, pouring through my journals and my daughter's diary and piecing it together. I learned so much more about what that trip was about through the process of writing. Because when you're traveling or living your life, everything's happening in real time. It's all happening so quickly. So writing is naturally a time for introspection and processing and integrating the experiences. So just write and don't worry about, how will it get published and so forth. If you're feeling like writing, just write as a practice. Write for the joy of it.
Aw. Thank you. That was great. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. This episode has been brought to you by Boombox Gifts, memory boxes filled with personal messages and photos from friends and family for your next special occasion. Boomboxgifts.com. Thanks to Ryan and Steve at Texture Sound for the audio editing and mixing. Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books.